everyone, I'm Naima. Welcome back to my channel. I make videos about living with long COVID and everything I learn along the way. This video is about long COVID and diet. Since the beginning, diet has been in the background of the conversation when it comes to long COVID recovery. Some long COVID sufferers have transformed their symptoms through diet. With me, it's been a bit more of a complicated story. What types of food trigger symptoms has changed at different points in my recovery. I noticed improvements in my symptoms when I eat lots of fiber, green vegetables and fruit, stay hydrated and avoid junk food. But it's difficult for me to tell whether there's an exact diet that works for me. I'm not a doctor or a nutritionist, but just someone who's trying to learn as much as I can about living as healthy a life as possible during my recovery period. None of what I say should be considered medical advice. In this video, I'll start by talking about the importance of diet when it comes to long COVID. I'll also be talking about low-histamine diet, plant-based and anti-inflammatory. I'll be explaining what they are, why they might help with long COVID, and I will talk about the pros and cons of each. I've actually had a lot of requests for this video and I really hesitated for a long time because there's so much already in our society that can lead to us feeling guilt and shame around food. With diet culture, the clean eating movement, and a binary view of good versus bad food can sometimes feel like we can never do this right. I don't want to add any guilt to people who are struggling with such a difficult illness already and add the stress on top of that of diet. In the early days of my recovery, I completely lost my appetite and I had to force myself to eat. In those moments, it did not make sense to have a strict diet or to restrict what I was eating because I needed to maintain a healthy weight. I ended up eating whatever I was craving at the time, which wasn't much. As well as loss of appetite, a lot of people also get smell and taste dysfunction when they have long COVID, and this can have a huge impact on appetite. With many long haulers bedbound or sleeping several hours a day, it can be hard to stay hydrated and to get all of the nutrients needed as part of a balanced diet. However, there are lots of different ways to combat long COVID symptoms through diet. As Boston University's clinical professor of nutrition, Dr. Blake, states, heart disease, certain cancers, strokes, and type 2 diabetes, you can fight all of these diseases with a knife and fork. That is empowering because it means you have control of what's on your plate and what you eat. One common approach is to eat more food that supports the immune system with a number of vitamins like A, B6, B12, C, folate, E, zinc, copper, selenium, and iron that can all play an important role in supporting the immune system. These types of vitamins can be found in fish and oily fish, green leafy vegetables like kale, spinach, and broccoli, nuts, seeds, and fruit. Another common approach is to eliminate foods that lead to increased symptoms. For some people with MCAS symptoms, this might include tomatoes, pineapples, alcohol, shellfish, food preservatives, or for someone who's looking to eliminate inflammation in the body, that might include sugar, processed foods, dairy, and gluten. So prior to getting long COVID, I did not know what histamine was, let alone what a low histamine diet was. And a couple of years ago, it became a key discussion point on a lot of long COVID forums. So histamine is a compound that is released by cells, often in response to an injury or an allergic reaction. It can lead to inflammation when it gets too high, or your body can struggle to break it down properly. Histamine levels increase the longer food is preserved. So there's a real impetus on eating fresh food. High histamine foods include alcohol, fermented foods like kimchi, sauerkraut, dairy products, shellfish, processed meat, and aged cheese. For people with severe MCAS symptoms, I've heard anecdotally that it is very effective at relieving symptoms, especially things like headaches, itchy skin, and other allergy-like symptoms. High levels of histamine can also disrupt biological functioning if too high. Some of the cons include that there's a lack of consensus on which foods are truly high in histamine. It is a very, very restrictive diet. It's very expensive. It's also very difficult if you struggle to cook because you're unwell, then it's very difficult to eat fresh every day and you can't store food for very long. many of the symptoms associated with long COVID could arise from chronic inflammation. An anti-inflammatory diet means avoiding foods that increase inflammation. For example, fried foods, refined carbohydrates, sugar, red and processed meat, and also focusing on foods that reduce inflammation, like tomatoes, olive oil, green leafy vegetables, nuts, fatty fish, strawberries and blueberries. This is the diet that I've more or less adopted for the last year, and I do believe it's helping me somewhat. So the positives are that it does aim to remove inflammation from the body. There are also clearer guidelines on what foods are inflammatory and which are not, and there's a lot more research around these types of diets as well. The cons are that, again, it is fairly restrictive. It's also expensive. Unfortunately, fruit, vegetables, lentils, pulses, and brown rice, brown bread, gluten-free bread, all of these things are very, very expensive in comparison to cheaper alternatives. Last but definitely not least, a plant-based diet involves cutting out animal products and being vegan or vegetarian. A plant-based diet is beneficial to markers of inflammation and might also favorably alter immune function. And symptoms such as fatigue, insomnia, and musculoskeletal pain can be improved with a plant-based diet. I ate mostly plant-based before getting long COVID, but found that I lost quite a lot of weight, so reintroduced meat. The pros are that it can increase energy and reduce fatigue, which is great when you're dealing with a fatigue-related illness. It also can lower inflammation and support immune function. The cons are that it is quite energy intensive to cook plant-based food, especially if you don't have much energy. It can also lead to weight loss as well, and it's a bit more difficult to get enough protein, which is really important for recovering from this type of illness. What about you? How important do you think diet is when it comes to long COVID? What kinds of diets have you tried and have they helped you? Please leave a comment below. If you're new here, don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll see you in my next video.